So you and I have been working together for 5 years on this. When did you come to our accelerator? Was it 2015 or 16?
2016. So we met when you had your Angel Summit down by the water there in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were part of the accelerator through that spring. And then we sprung into our first wave in the summer. So in July, we kind of came out and then, started hardcore R&D at that point. But that was kind of the kickoff.
And the concept originally was, hey, you had worked at Amazon. I think we're not breaking any NDAs here, but they had aspirations to build stores, and you were involved in that product early on, correct?
Yeah, I mean, basically in the process of working on Go and books, it just became, I mean, the challenge was how do you build 80,000 stores, right? And so in, short, the answer was buy Whole Foods. But leading up to that, there was a lot of work on the business model and looking at like, how do you build a repeatable process? And so in building out books, I mean, we built out Amazon books in like 6 months. It was a crazy hair on fire process. And all of the major risk was around standard construction and permitting. And we did, 1,000 times the innovation on the internal side, but then going through the standard sort of real estate process, that's where all the red lights were. And so in looking at that, there was a lot of, you could kind of see the writing on the wall in terms of the need for the industry to embrace productization and standardization. But that's really kind of step one. And then obviously, as you were alluding to in the intro, all the eggs break from there to getting to actually having something that's viable as a development process.
And I think one of the great insights was, hey, if you're building on site, that's the equivalent of Tesla shipping a bunch of parts, dropping them in your driveway and building a car in your driveway. That is the state of building housing today. And you said there's got to be a better way. Let's build the homes, the blocks, as we say, in a factory, ship them to the location, and then do the last 5, 10, 15% of the construction process on site. How has that actually manifested itself in the real world? I know that Phoenix Rising, a Blokable project for affordable housing, had the ribbon cutting, I think last year?
Or it was late last year when we opened it and finally opened the doors. Yeah. I mean, you're basically trying to move as much of the process as you can into the factory. But then, you kind of get to the larger issue, which is the business model, which ultimately drives the product development process. So the way that the industry, because modular construction as a process has been around for decades, right? And so it's been around 30, 40 years. But what it's typically meant has been to move the framing process of construction into the factory. So you take labor and you move it into a factory, you take supply chain, you move it into a factory, and then you're either building out of wood or you're building out of steel. But ultimately what you're doing is the building framing. So developers, who are the ones who kind of control what gets built, where it gets built, how it gets financed, who lives in it, how the value is created, they're ultimately the ones who drive the economics. Previous and a lot of current incarnations of modular or prefab are set up to sell to the developer, right? So you build some kind of process that's going to save the developer some amount of money. So let's say framing is 20% of a construction budget, and let's say a construction budget is 65% of the total development budget. So a developer can look at building their building out and getting the framing process done in a factory. And if that can save them some money and some time, they'll buy that. But it means you will never really get to any significant amount of standardization in the factory because all you're really doing is the framing. And the developer could always do the framing on site. So the modular part of the process is just a commodity. And so the developer is basically, calling all the factories and saying, who can build me this part of my project cheaper because that's what will make my project pencil. So the approach that we took is very different, which as the developer, building a fully standardized, productized system that we manufacture ourselves, but also that we sort of take the maximum upside of because we're the developers. So the big moment for us was, after we got through our first phases of product innovation, so the framing, prototyping, building out a few small buildings. The building that we brought to down to the innovation center that one time, we trucked a building all the way down, loaded it into the innovation center, and people are like walking into a small studio apartment inside of a conference center, basically, right? That was still in the process of, what materials are we using? How much labor does it take to build one of these things? What kind of energy efficiency can we get? How do you load it onto a truck? How far can the truck go? What kind of, what are the economics of logistics? There's so much that you're working out that's just baseline. But then the real issue for us was becoming the developer. And so once you have those core product sort of, structural, how does it get approved by the state? How does it get approved by the local municipality? Once you've worked through all of that, then you have the set of problems, which is about, well, how do I develop using this system? And so Nelson and I, in going through that process, that's really where the value is created. And all of your decisions change, because if you look at the economics of a real estate development versus the economics of selling a modular product to a developer, they don't even resemble each other. And that was kind of the big insight.
So to recap there, if you sell a developer a unit, they are going to do what's in their best interest, which is get the lowest possible price, charge the highest possible price when they complete the project, and between those two numbers is their profit. So that is for them, I guess, the virtuous way to run their business. But what you realized was they probably maybe don't care about the long-term value of the asset in the way their customer, who is actually building the units and owning them, does, correct?
Well,
so there's an incentive issue there?
It is, but it's also like real estate is just this unique business model, right? So like in a typical product sale, like you can make a product, someone can buy the product, you make some margin on the product, and they purchase the product and use the project. The developer is a bit of an intermediary. The developer is eventually going to rent, right? So they're going to rent these units into the marketplace. So for a developer, where the disconnect happens is for every dollar that the modular construction company can make as a profit, that dollar is worth $10 in equity to the developer, right? So the modular contractor, it's never worth as much to them as it is to the developer to get a cheaper price. And so you have this constant fight over, what should the cost be? Like we get multiple inquiries every week from developers who would love to buy our product to use for their project. And the only question that they'll ask is, what's your cost? And the reason that they're asking that question is because they can't get projects to pencil, right? So they're looking at their build. They've got some dirt. They've got it lined up. They know what the rents are. They want to go build something, but it's too expensive. It's too expensive in the market. So they look at modular plants and saying, you should make this cheaper for me. If you make it cheaper for me, I don't really care what happens to you, but if you make this cheaper for me, now all the economics work and I've got something that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars because you've built it for me at a cost that now allows me to take the equity in the project.
How much time and money do you spend integrating a bunch of different software products all together? Let me guess, way too much time. Well, Odoo is here to help you with that. Odoo is a suite of business apps that runs your entire company on one platform. They'll streamline workflows by bringing all your information together. Plus, Odoo's integrations eliminate repetitive tasks and data entry. If you only need 2 or 3 apps to optimize your workflow, well, that's all you're going to pay for. Odoo won't stick you with the bill for apps you don't use. And Odoo has an app for every business need. They offer 30 main apps that are updated regularly and over 16,000 apps from their active open source community. So you can keep your books tight with their financial software, and you can add their sales and CRM apps to help provide a clear and organized view of your business. It's a great platform. Many people are using it in the startup community and raving about it. Your first app is free forever. And right now, Odoo is sweetening the pot with a $1,000 credit on your first implementation pack. That's right. No joke. $1,000 off. Go get that $1,000 credit at odoo.com/twist. That's ODOO.com/twist. ODOO.com/twist.